Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today our lecture will be about the basal ganglia. We will first discuss its basal functional parts of the basal ganglia and its role and what will happen if there is an abnormality or damage to its different parts, what will happen. And lastly, we will discuss the parts of the reticular activating system. First, we will come to what are the parts of the basal ganglia. They are composed mainly of four parts. The first one is the caudate nucleus located here, and this is what's called the putamen, the large ones. Both are previously were known as the striatum. And we have a globus pallidus internus and externus. These are globus pallidus externus and internus. And below there are what's called substantia nigra here and here, and above it are the subthalamic nuclei. What's the space in between these parts? It's called the internal capsule, and we discussed in the previous lectures the significance of the internal capsule, that almost all the sensory and motor pathway, mainly the corticospinal tract, passes through this space. So if there is a lesion or tumor compressing to that space, the internal capsule, it will cause a variable degree of weakness of skull movement of the contralateral side of the body. These are caudate nucleus, as we said, and the putamen. Both are called striatum, globus pallidus internus externus, substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nuclei. It's called with the cerebellum. They are called accessory motor system. It's concerned with motor control of activity and in different parts. And we discussed about the internal capsule. The function of the putamen circuit. One of the principal roles of the basal ganglia is complex pattern of motor activity. Let's, for example, writing a letter of an alphabet. When there is damage to the putamen, the writing will be cross, as if the person was first time to write, when there is damage to the basal ganglia. Regarding the neuronal circuit and pathways of the putamen circuit, they begin from premotor supplementary motor areas of the cortex, passing to the putamen, bypassing the caudate nucleus to globus pallidus next to the nuclei of the thalamus, and from the thalamus to the cortex. We notice these are the neuronal circuits. What is in red, it's mainly an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and what's in green, it is a facilitatory or excitatory, and the neurotransmitter, it's an excitatory one. But the net result of the basal ganglia, what's here to the thalamus, is an inhibitory one, inhibitory to the thalamocortical pathway, and this is for specific purposes, so that to suppress activity during quiet conditions. The role of the basal ganglia of the caudate circuit is in the cognition of motor activity, when there is cognitive control of motor activity, so that control motor according to the experiences and the memories stored. And the famous example of that, when a person see like a lion approaching, what will happen? This cognitive motor of control of activity. Also, one of the capabilities of the basal ganglia is to determine how rapidly the movement, or how large, and even how strong. So that, for example, when writing a letter or a word, it's a different. So how to control the size of what we write, whether on a small piece of paper, note paper, or on A4, or on a writing board in the class. The size of the word we write it is different. The control of the size of what we write is one of the functions of the basal ganglia. Also controlling the strength of our touch and our movement, so that touching the keyboard and working on the keyboard, the strength of our finger and hand movement working with it is different when working in some all vigorous handwork. When there is damage to the basal ganglia, this will cause a disorder. Okay, we come here to movement, the role of the basal ganglia. It's what's called movement modulation through disinhibition. What's mean? We said previously that the net result of the output in nuclear basal ganglia is inhibitory. This is during quiet conditions. The output in nuclear basal ganglia are of high tonic discharge so that to suppress activity and to prevent any unnecessary movement. While when we intend to move, there will be decrease inhibition of the inhibition, so that it's called movement modulation through disinhibition of the thalamocortical pathway or region, so that when in movement there will be disinhibition of that way because we suppressed the output of the basal ganglia at movement, so that will lead to initiation of movement. That is what is called the movement modulation through disinhibition. This is the summary of what we said. What are the neurotransmitter? Dopamine, here mostly inhibitory. GABA, always inhibitory. Acetylcholine are excitatory. Multiple areas secrete norepinephrine, serotonin, enkephalin. Also multiple glutamate pathways. That's inhibitory also to dopamine and GABA. What will happen if there is an abnormal function to the basal ganglia? Lesion of the globus pallidus produce what is called athetosis. Athetosis, it is continuous, repetitive, slow writhing movement of the hand, arm and the neck sometimes, face, called athetosis. This is what's called athetosis. Slow, repetitive writhing, what's called بالعربي التلوي، يعني تلوي حركة اليد. Slow, repetitive writhing movement, what's called athetosis. Lesion in the subthalamus, what's called sudden flailing movement of the entire limb, what's called hemibalismus. Also lesions in the putamen lead to flicking movement, like dancing like movement of the hand, face, other part of the body, what's called chorea, and we will come to the disease later, what's called Huntington's chorea. Lesions in substantia nigra lead to what's called Parkinson's disease, and we will come to it here. Parkinson's disease result widespread destruction or degeneration of parts of substantia nigra. Thus are the dopaminergic or the dopamine secreting neurons. When there is damage to these neurons, what's called Parkinson's disease. It's a triad of symptoms, we can say it, rigidity, tremor and akinesia. Tremor, it's called what's pill rolling tremor. It is resting tremor, what's called pill rolling tremor. Also there is rigidity and akinesia. Huntington's disease, there is hereditary symptoms at 30 to 40 years by flicking movement of the individual muscle, then severe distortional movement, dancing like, also a severe dementia develops. This disorder mainly causes loss of the GABA secreting neurons in the caudate and the putamen, and some of acetylcholine secreting neuron. Now we come to the reticular activating system. This is what is called the reticular activating system of the brainstem. It is composed of larger upper area in the pons and the midbrain, and smaller medullary inhibitory area at the medulla. And we take it from the motor system lectures that there is lateral, mainly with the medullary reticular formation, and this role is an inhibitory one, while the ventral reticular spinal tract originated from the excitatory area, and it promote an excitation or facilitatory role to the cortex. The level of the activity of the excitatory area in the brainstem, so the level of the number of the type of sensory signals.